Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I've got another watercolor speed paint for you, so let's dive right into it. Alright, first of all, I would like to apologize. It is currently raining and there's nothing I can do about that. I have to get this voiceover done and it's just gonna keep raining. And hopefully it doesn't thunder too much either. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's talk about the materials for this video. So I used some Strathmore 300 series watercolor paper. I used my Winsor and Newton Cotman watercolors, as well as some Prismacolor colored pencils. So that pretty much covers it. Oh, hang on. The brushes I used were my Princeton brush and Grumbacher brush. And that covers all of that. All the materials. Now on to the artwork. If you were to go to my Instagram page, you would be able to see the original idea and development of this piece was actually a sketch in my sketchbook, where I came up with this idea of a woman in a long corseted dress standing at the edge, like at the railing of a lighthouse. And it was a really interesting image to me, but also it felt like it could be really powerful as well. So I knew definitely I wanted to do something else with it, rather than just leave it as a sketch. I knew there was more possibility there. So I eventually decided that it needed to become a watercolor piece of its own, and I'm super happy that I made the decision that it needed to become a full piece, because it's definitely one of my favorite pieces of all time at this point. And you know, part of that is that this idea was sticking with me so much that I wanted it to be a piece, a very polished piece that I could eventually sell if I wanted to. So I used my higher quality materials. Those were the highest quality materials that I had at the point when I was making this. I have since gotten some better paints, but still these are on the nicer side of student quality, is what I would say for these materials. So I could sell this piece if I wanted to, because it has a certain amount of light fastness and archival quality. It's not the best, but it will do, and I think that was sort of a cool approach. I know that sometimes in some circumstances having that sort of thing where you're like, I want to be able to sell this at some point, is a lot of pressure and could, you know, make it more difficult to make a piece that you're happy with. But in this case, having that was actually kind of exciting, because I'd never started a piece that way, thinking that I actually want this to be quality, not just let's give it a go and see what happens. I love doing that as well, but just having this different sort of goal going forward made this piece really exciting. So, but I find art all exciting in all all sorts of situations. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Let's talk about the line art for this one. You can see that there is a sort of mid-tone brown that is just the lines. At this point I didn't do any ink or anything, it's just the pencil. But the pencil that I used at the beginning was too light, so I found that it wasn't showing up well. It sort of disappeared under some of the watercolor, and it just wasn't working, but it was a great guide for the sketch and for doing the paints. And then I went on over on top of it with a Prismacolor Verithin colored pencil in the color black to do more of the lines and sort of just shore them up and give it that a little bit more precision and more contrast so you could actually see it, but it was still a colored pencil, so it wasn't a totally sharp line. It was still had some softness that I wouldn't be able to get from ink, and that look was what I was going for with the colored pencil. It just took me a little bit to get there, but fortunately we made it through, and it was a really fun process. Even most of the way through, even in the beginning, I knew that the lighter brown wasn't gonna hold up against the paints, and I love layering. I like contrast, so I knew that having like all these layers and getting steadily darker, you weren't going to be able to see that mid-tone brown. Even though it's a nice color, usually it doesn't work in this instance. So I got that figured out, and I love the way that the pencil looks. That worked out really well. I did work quite a bit on the colors for this one. I wanted to be pretty specific, and because a lot of it is heavily blue, with the blue of the sky, which is a little bit stormy, so it's kind of dark, and then the blue of the water, of course, I wanted to figure out how to fit those blues in, make them stand out from each other, and also work with the rest of the piece. It wasn't an easy task, but I really love the color scheme that I ended up with. Originally, when I was doing my earlier color composition, like my final rendition of what I thought I was going to end up with, there was a lot more red in her dress, but I ended up going a lot more purple, and I think that worked out pretty well, because I don't think that the red would have stood out a lot, but it wouldn't have gone together with the rest of the piece as well. So I think that having it more predominantly purple was definitely to the benefit of this piece. So that was cool. So I also wanted to talk about the process that went into coming up with the sketch and like figuring out the placement of all the things, because it wasn't the same layout that I had in my original sort of concept sketch that I posted on Instagram. I have it a little bit more zoomed in, and the character is facing sort of the viewer rather than just looking straight off into the distance, so we just see the back of her head and the back of her dress. That way, you can see her expression, have a little bit more personality and connection with the character and with the piece. So I did like that I included that, but it did take a lot of work to figure out how I would get it to look realistic, how I would get her to stand on the railing, how I would make that look right as well. But also a huge piece of this was the lighthouse is very important aspect of it, and I didn't realize how complicated lighthouses really were. And then and something that I had to look up and research was because the character is distinctly Victorian, was like I had to figure out, did they use lighthouses very often at this time, and what kind of styles did they have. I didn't find any really good reference photos for like current well-kept Victorian lighthouses, but I do know that they existed, and I found some old lighthouses to use as reference, even though they're not quite from the right time period. And then I sort of changed it a little bit to suit my needs as well, which was important. And then I very much simplified the light inside the lighthouse so that it was something that I could actually understand how to paint, because I had to make it look like it was glowing, like there was light inside it, so I had to understand how it was actually going to work. And then normally lighthouses have like lots of intricacies with like the optics and stuff, so that they can get the brightest light possible from like what they had, which was like an oil lamp or a candle or something smaller in there that they had to magnify. So I definitely went a little bit simpler on that. But something I am pretty proud of is that I incorporated the lighting of the light into a lot of the art pieces, but a lot of the elements of the art. But I think that, as always, I could have done a little bit more with like shadows, and I didn't. So for reference, light is coming from the right side of the page, so that's where the I guess the sun would be, sort of that way, and then she's a little bit backlit, but it's not very clear because the left side of her is not very dark. So that is something that I always struggle with, and I know I have struggled with lighting, just pushing it as far as it can go. I think that that is something that looks really great, but is kind of challenging to do, and it's difficult to make yourself go that extra step because it's a little risky, is what it feels like. So that's all I have to say about the artwork for this one. Now I want to talk a little bit about what I was thinking for this character and for like the story behind her. So I don't actually have a name for her. I guess I just never got to that piece in her story, but I do know that she is the person who tends the lighthouse. She makes sure that it stays lit all the time, even especially during storms, really, and she makes sure that boats are staying safe and away from the rocks, and like her job is to stay there and keep the lighthouse running. But it feels like she's trapped on land in this tower, really, and what she really wants is to be out on the ocean, having that adventure that she never gets to be a part of because she is taking care of all the other adventurers. So that's just a little bit of background on her, and sort of the idea of, she has a sort of a somber expression, and, longing for a wider area of exploration, and a desire to sort of go and explore the rest of the ocean and the parts that she normally doesn't get to see. So that is all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this fun watercolor that was a little bit different from what I normally do, in that I was going for a little bit more polished. So thank you so much for watching, and please like and subscribe if you're feeling like it, and until next time, live life respectfully. Bye.